Have you ever noticed that the harder we chase after happiness, the more it seems to slip away? We join groups, sign up for classes, search for friends in every corner of life, yet still feel a quiet emptiness inside. Sometimes the very thing we long for isn't waiting out there at all, but resting quietly in a place we've forgotten. This is the story of Ellen and the garden she thought she had left behind. Ellen had worked for 30 years in a downtown insurance office. She was reliable, punctual, and organized, the kind of person her colleagues always depended on. But when retirement arrived, she found herself facing a silence she didn't expect. The ringing phones were gone, the stacks of paperwork disappeared, and the endless stream of clients vanished overnight. At first, she thought retirement would feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like drifting without a map. She signed up for everything she could find in her small Midwestern town: a pottery class at the community center, a book club at the library, a senior aerobics group at the YMCA. She even tried a line dancing night at the American Legion Hall. Each time she arrived with hope. But each time, she left feeling strangely out of place, like a guest at a party where she didn't quite belong. Ellen wanted connection. She wanted laughter, purpose, and a sense of belonging. But the more she reached for it, the more it slipped through her hands. After months of trying, she sat one gray morning at her kitchen table, staring out the window, feeling heavier than she ever had during her working years. That's when she noticed it, the tangled mess behind her house. The garden had once belonged to her mother. Years ago, her mother had tended it every morning, whispering to the tomatoes as though they were children, brushing her hands across the lavender for the scent. Ellen remembered being a girl, barefoot in the soil, carrying baskets of cucumbers inside while her mother hummed an old tune. But after her mother passed, the garden slowly sank into neglect. The weeds grew tall, the soil hardened, and Ellen stopped going out there. It hurt too much. On that gray morning, something stirred in her. Maybe it was the silence, maybe the ache of missing her mother, maybe the need to do something with her hands. She tied her hair back, pulled on a pair of old gloves, and walked into the backyard. At first, the work was grueling. The weeds clung like stubborn memories, the earth cracked and dry. Ellen's back ached, and sweat ran down her temples. She nearly gave up after the first hour, but something kept her there. Each time she pulled a weed, it felt as though she was clearing a piece of her own heart. Each time she turned the soil, it was like she was loosening the soil of her grief. Then, one afternoon, her trowel struck something hard. She knelt down, brushed away the dirt, and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed, but her breath caught when she opened it. It was her mother's handwriting. Inside were simple entries, like a garden diary, notes about which plants thrived in which corner, reminders to water early in the morning, sketches of roses, and little personal reflections. One entry read, "The garden is where I feel closest to myself." I hope one day Ellen will see it that way too. Ellen sat back on her heels, tears filling her eyes. She had been chasing after connection, joining every club in town, searching for belonging. And here, buried under the soil, was her mother's voice, whispering across time, "Slow down, the roots are already here." From that day on, the garden became her ritual. She planted tomatoes, beans, zinnias, and lavender, just like her mother had. Each morning she went out with coffee in hand, humming that same old tune. Something in her shifted. She no longer felt the desperate need to sign up for this or that. She felt grounded, present, and unexpectedly at peace. But the story didn't end there. One Saturday morning, as she was kneeling among the marigolds, her neighbor, Mr. Johnson, a widower who lived 2 houses down, wandered over. He leaned on the fence and called out, "You've brought that old garden back to life. I haven't seen it look like that since your Mother's Day." Soon after, Mrs. Ramirez from next door came by with a basket of lemons from her own tree. Then the couple across the street stopped in to ask if she had extra tomatoes. One by one, neighbors began to gather. Some offered seeds, others shared recipes. A few just came for the simple pleasure of sitting in the shade and talking while Ellen pulled weeds. What had once been a lonely backyard slowly turned into a little community hub. Conversations bloomed where weeds once stood. Laughter filled the air where silence used to weigh heavy. Ellen realized she had found what she had been searching for all along, not in the classes or the clubs, but right there in her own soil. And maybe the biggest surprise? She wasn't the only one who had needed it. Her neighbors confessed that they, too, had been feeling isolated. They hadn't known how to reach out. But when they saw Ellen working quietly in her garden, it gave them a doorway. Ellen often sits now on her back porch in the evenings, watching the fireflies rise above the flowers, her neighbors' voices carrying across the fence. She still keeps her mother's diary on a little shelf by the kitchen window. Sometimes she opens it just to read the line that changed everything. "The garden is where I feel closest to myself." And she finally understands. We spend so much of our lives chasing after happiness, thinking it waits for us in new jobs, new friends, new places. But more often than not, it waits quietly in the places we've overlooked, asking only that we slow down long enough to notice. Because happiness isn't always found in the search. Sometimes it blooms in the soil we once forgot, waiting patiently for us to return.